Hey guys, it's Scott Bars here, the self-proclaimed hip-hop historian, and this is the 182nd episode of my series where I grab a vinyl from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it has, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. So obviously, there's really no album that after that first pick could reach that same level of personal impact, but this one sure comes close. And to be fair, it's definitely marginally more influential on the culture than So the Flies Don't Come. In fact, Lil Ugly Mane was an artist who I bonded with a close friend in high school over, and coincidentally, he was also the only person I'd ever met who was a fan of Milo and Hellfire Club, which I remember totally shocking me at the time, and it was similar with acts like Death Grips, though obviously they have a bit more cachet to their name. And this was all despite the fact that really none of those acts had much in common outside of existing within the same overall genre. But with Lil Ugly Mane, this friend in question really turned me on to his music, which I grew to appreciate more and more over time, especially the further we got into the 2010s, with that SoundCloud scene that included acts like Suicide Boys, Puya, Germ, or Ramirez. And it's kind of similar with the more experimental acts like Clipping or JPEG Mafia, though neither of those were really SoundCloud artists per se. Of course, this sound that collectives and labels like G59 have utilized over the last decade stems from much older artists like 36 Mafia, DJ Spanish Fly, Bone Thugs and Harmony, and of course the late great DJ Screw. However, when it comes to bringing this style back to the forefront of popularity, a large deal of credit has to go to dudes like Space Ghost Perp, Denzel Curry, who I actually first was introduced to through his diss track towards Space Ghost Perp, and Lil Ugly Mane. And in case you didn't know, Lil Ugly Mane and Denzel Curry have a number of collaborations from the kind of early to mid 2010s, all of which are fire. And all of those guys incorporated the dark, lean-filled, chopped and screwed sound way before it made that full resurgence in the SoundCloud days. This is really one of the only artists I can think of besides Quasimodo, who pretty much solely raps through a filtered voice, and he even alters it when he performs live from what I remember. This allows Lil Ugly Mane to not only sound much more menacing than your average white guy rap voice, but it also gives this character a sense of grandeur and mystique, as if he's this dark, mysterious entity and not just some guy walking around. I think I actually discussed it a little bit in my review for DJ Shadow's Introducing, where even though it doesn't have that much in common with Mista Thug Isolation, a good amount of the other Ugly Mane projects feature a slew of influences and sample material ranging from black metal and folk to punk and noise music. He gets into even bleaker territory through his bedwetter persona, where I remember me and a good amount of other fans and music bloggers sharing their worries for his mental health after dropping his grim 2017 debut with that name, titled Volume 1, Flick Your Tongue Against Your Teeth and Describe the Present. If you've never listened to anything by Lil Ugly Mane or his alter egos, I would definitely recommend starting with the nearly 11-minute magnum opus of a single, which is called Uneven Compromise, and fully displays his tendency for winding, twisting musical passages that incorporate all kinds of sounds and genres. That mashup of sorts also features my favorite Ugly Mane song, Buried Within It, which is a gut-wrenching story track where he describes meeting up with an old friend, seeing that he became a heroin addict, and giving him some money to help out before both going on their way. However, he later sees the relative that this friend had supposedly been staying with, and when he asks about him, the aunt says that they're dead to them and that they would call the police if they ever saw this person. Lil Ugly Mane understandably is confused and asks why, and the person informs him that this friend had brutally murdered his own kids, or at least was the main suspect in that case, which our protagonist tries to internally deny and come up with an excuse or explanation for, but ultimately knows deep down that this lady isn't lying to him. It's a powerful and haunting concept song, And I wanted to mention it here since I'm not sure if I'll ever get a chance to really focus in on that single. And it's also littered with some of the best beats this dude has ever made, which is really no small feat, by the way, because if I haven't mentioned it yet, Lil Ugly Mane does all of his own production, which is part of the reason he's so heavily credited with repackaging that old 3/6 sound and making that chopped and screwed technique palatable for a younger generation. He actually was in a short-lived rap group called Secret Circle, which included fellow underground veterans Wiki of Rat King and Antoine, who unfortunately got exposed for some degree of sexual assault. I don't remember exactly what happened as this act was somewhat unknown and it was years ago, but Ugly Mane and Wiki cut all ties and shelved the album they'd been preparing up until then, though it's a shame considering how my friends and I waited on every single they released up until that point, and must have played the few songs that they did drop 100 times each. However, Ugly Mane was the one who went out of his way to ensure the disbandment of this group, as in Antoine's case, he didn't want to have any association with someone who'd been documented doing the type of things he had, and this wasn't out of fear of being cancelled, it was out of a sense of morality and wanting female fans to be able to go to a show while still being able to feel safe. I think it's a shining example of how people love to throw terms like misogynistic at someone like Ugly Mane, who may have an affinity for a word like bitch or hoe, yet they much less frequently mention these moments where he publicly would take a stand against something like sexual assault. And not just in some window dressing way either. He did this in a way that very feasibly could have hurt his revenue stream and bottom line. He may talk about getting wasted on lean or other drugs, and use the type of horrorcore imagery that acts like grave diggers or ghetto boys popularized. But at the end of the day, it's just a normal, if insanely talented guy who just so happens to have an affinity for more disturbing topics in art, which more often than not is therapeutic and used as catharsis. But aside from the content, the thing that sells a lot of people on Ugly Mane's music is his ridiculously hard 808s and loops that borrow from some of the most sinister 90s reference material and spruce them up with more modern drum programming and mixing, or he'll use a vocal chop and put it in a whole new context. He's a master at layering different bits and pieces to make a gumbo of all these sounds that somehow doesn't come off the least bit clunky or overbearing. The thing with this twisted, southern trap inspired subgenre is a lot of the artists that came a bit after Lil Ugly Mane had the tendency to sort of phone in the lyrics at times, most likely because they knew they were going fast enough to get away with that. The thing with Mr. Thug Isolation is while it may not read like literal poetry the way my last pick does, it has some insanely disturbing and vivid imagery, and there's a lot of subtlety in the way this guy paints a picture. I also feel like it's a lot more geared towards building an overall aesthetic and vibe. The words he will go with on top of his choice and flow combine to make one of the most captivating styles in hip hop that's proven impossible to recreate, as I really don't feel like any LP released in this internet-born subgenre has surpassed this one. You could maybe make an argument that some of JPEG Mafia's stuff has taken it in a different direction, but that type of internet rap is much less South-inspired and pretty void of chopping and screwing for the most part. Ugly Mane also has a studied pen that shows he's definitely a true student of the game, with rhyme schemes and patterns that get pretty complex at times. I want to share one of my many favorite verses on Mr. Thug Isolation, where Lil Ugly Mane displays his talent for both grimy, hardcore gangster raps and internal rhyming, with I'm being goofy on a black Suzuki screaming free Boosie, shooting out the tires on cars while they moving, headed to this bitch crib who said she will seduce me if her booty is a clue, I know she gotta keep the coochie juicy. I'm a Mac, bout to break this bitch back. If her man wanna yap, I got the chopper and the lack. I'm omnipotent, never worried I can make you vanish. Ain't a pussy on the block I can't manage left-handed. Pump leave her wound so big you can't bandage. Sorry bitch, I know I got the unfair advantage. Cup full of Beetlejuice, puffin' on that loud, ugly main back, playa how you like me now. The production is completely handled by Sean Kemp, which is basically just Ugly Mane's alias when he's producing, sort of similar to what Earl Sweatshirt does with Some Black Guy. But the features give us a couple more names to mention, those being Denzel Curry and Supa Sorta Human. I love every track on here immensely, but to narrow my three favorites down, they'd probably be Cup Full of Beetlejuice, No Slack in My Mac, and Lean Got Me Fucked Up. For honorable mentions, I have a number of awesome tracks to recommend, including Twistin', Throw Dem Guns, Mona Lisa Overdrive, Serious Shit, Maniac Drug Dealer 3, Radiation or Lung Pollution, Slick Rick, Wishmaster, and Bitch I'm Lugubrious. Thank you for watching my 182nd video. Next time we're gonna return to the infamous Griselda Collective for the first time in a while, so check for that upload, and if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what your favorite moments of this dark piece of hip-hop history are. Don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time, okay? Okay.
Who would do such a thing? Look, I stand in the flame of a feeling we call pain. Father's Day mug, little hand shaped in clay. Carrier planes flew overhead in pockets.